You know what? I have been sitting here saying hi and wondering why no one is responding. And the reason no one is responding is because I didn't hit go live. So I will go back to the beginning. Good afternoon, invisible borderline. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And hello, Ryan, or Rayan. Rayan, can you let me know if I'm pronouncing your name right? Because I don't want to get it wrong. And hello, that mastermind, that is a cool username. And hi, on your way. And thank you for pointing out that you guys did not have video, because I have been sitting here talking to nobody. Sorry. The humiliation. I'm just going to put a message. Can you guys hear and see me now? There we go. Yes, you can. Thank you so much. Oh, no. Never mind. We're learning. We're learning. So moving past anxious attachment style, such an important issue. Do you have a video on that this week? I know you've watched it, Invisible Borderlines. You very kindly shared it on your channel, so thank you so much for that. You guys tell me, what did you see the video? What was helpful? What was not helpful? What stood out to you? That would be really interesting for me to hear. I think the key that really unlocks things for people with that very anxious attachment style is learning how to tolerate the possibility of rejection without seeing it as any kind of commentary on your worth or your lovability. Because I think one of the things with an anxious attachment style is you're very driven to be close and connected. And a sense of not being close or connected is so anxiety provoking. You can end up doing things like tolerating behaviors that are really not very nice to tolerate. You maybe don't stand up for yourself, or you hold yourself back. You try to please the other person rather than being clear about what you need or want. And you can kind of do lots of little bids for connection that can just, if they're not responded to, can be so hurtful. So I think particularly in early stages of a relationship, being able to express your needs, express your wishes very clearly, and then listen carefully to the response, and know that the response, even if it's not what you wanted to hear, is still very, very useful information, because you might learn that the other person doesn't want the kind of relationship that you want. You might learn that they have very different values to you, and that doesn't mean they're right or you're wrong, or you're right and they're wrong. You could just be very, very different. Or you could actually learn they want the same thing as you. And being able to tolerate that possibility of rejection is incredibly helpful if you have an anxious attachment style. I think that's really, really key. And there was a really interesting podcast this week from Diary of a CEO. I don't know if you guys are probably not all in the UK. Diary of a CEO is the biggest podcast in the UK at the moment. And he did an interview this week with Esther Perel. His name's Stephen Bartlett. He's the CEO who does the podcast. And he was talking about his own experiences. I think he has a more avoidant attachment style. He's someone who's more worried about his relationship detracting from his work, from his interests, from the things that are really, really important to him. And his girlfriend, based on what he's saying, seems to have a more anxious style. And he talks about her coming knocking, these little bids for connection. She's like, hey, I want to show you this thing that I read. I want to show you this TikTok I've seen. And she's waiting for his response. And then when he doesn't give it, when he's distracted, when he's acting bored, when he's disengaged, she knocks all the more. He creates the anxiety and the desperation in her for contact with him. And of course, the more she has that desperation and desire for contact, and she goes knock, 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 knocking, the more he's like, push away, push away, push away. And I think that's really helpful to understand that dynamic as well. And what he also said is that if she didn't do that knocking, at some point, he would get anxious and he would have to go and look for her and do his bit to restore the relationship. And I think that's actually a really useful thing to learn. If you're someone with an anxious attachment style, don't do all the work. Leave it for the other person to do some of the work too. So let me know, is that helpful, not helpful? Is it what you expected? No, I have not been watching your life. But here's the thing. I actually have to say this to people when I see them in therapy now because of being on YouTube, is that I never ever put anything on YouTube or social media that's based on something someone has told me in a therapy session or a coaching session. I never do that. However, our lives are so common. The issues we experience in our relationships are universal. And so you may look at things I've put on the internet and think, wow, it's like she's talking about me. And, these are universal experiences that we all have and that exist in all relationships. They're much bigger and stronger and more overwhelming when you have someone with very high levels of pathological narcissism. But they exist in all relationships. They really, really do. Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think that what you're talking about, an ex-BPP, ex-partner with NPD, and you were at cross purposes. I'd be really interested. What were the two things in conflict there? Because I think sometimes you have, at the more ordinary end of the spectrum, where you have people who don't have extreme personality types, who are not high in narcissism, who are generally people who can get along in their relationships. Sometimes in their close relationships, you'll find these more anxious avoidant patterns coming to the fore. And they can be worked with. They can actually be worked with often quite straightforwardly if that both people are willing to do so. But where you are super cross purposes, there's no, you have to accept we're cross purposes. We want different things in life. We don't want the same. And that's okay. That's really okay. So Rayan, the question would be how to cope better with the boundaries of others without seeing them as a rejection. That's a really interesting question. I think, it boils down to, I think, acceptance that you may want different things. I'm thinking about dating someone who I liked and him being quite clear he didn't want children. And quite early on, he was clear he didn't want children. And I was like, I think I do. So, I think you have to both respect your own boundaries and theirs. And maybe you want different things. And that doesn't make anyone right or anyone wrong. It just means that there's some different values. There's some different things in this relationship. And I think just accepting people's boundaries, not as like it's okay. Give me an example of a boundary that might be hard to accept. That would be really, really helpful to me to just understand a bit more what you mean by that. It's the extremes, I think, in these relationships that just, I also think even if you start out relatively secure, if you spend long enough in a relationship with someone who's on that higher end of the narcissism spectrum and very pathological, you cannot not develop some significant insecurity in your attachment style. It's just inevitable. And I think it's really helpful to know that. I think it's also really helpful to know that it's a feature of this relationship. It doesn't mean it has to be a feature of every other relationship you're ever in. But also be aware that the ways that you come to see yourself and you come to see your relationships may well be colored by that relationship, especially if it's been a really important relationship or a long relationship. And good evening, PD Questions. It's been a while and I need to reply to your message on Instagram. I will. Let me read the questions. You've heard a lot about ideal parenting to help children soothe emotions. What about helping children tolerate unpleasant or dissonant reality where there may be no immediate soothing? And you wonder if we're not imposing an excessive expectation of pleasantness or soothing as an expectation. And to me, an ideal would be to condition children to accept and tolerate discomfort as a way of growing. I think it's both. I think part of being a good parent is not giving your child endless praise and rewards and nice things, because that's not life. You have to go to bed, you have to eat your vegetables, you have to go to school, you have to do some things that might even be quite scary. And I think you can approach that with an attitude of encouragement and support. And I think the important thing is it's not punitive. And I think you need to balance. I think in parenting, you need to be warm, but you need to be warm and you also need to have boundaries. You need to have rules. You need to help a child learn to tolerate challenges, to approach challenges. So yeah, I don't think it's like there, let me make you feel good, but it can be, I support you and I encourage you. But part of me supporting and encouraging you is to help you in challenging and discomfort, and it's to help you through challenging and uncomfortable situations sometimes, because those are part of life. And it's to kind of encourage that. And yeah, it's learning as well how to just be with discomfort and the conflicts of real relationships. So it's always really interesting to me. I think so being a psychologist and a parent is an interesting experience. And I know that my kid has always, like from really early on, I labeled all her emotions. It was just like intuitive for me. That was just what I would do. And I was also really like okay with her expressing anger. So I'd be like, you're really angry. That's so annoying. Oh, you're so angry. Oh, and but then I'd also be like, that's okay. You can be angry at me. You still have to go to bed. Or you can be angry at me, but you're not getting any more cookies. So she learned to do that. But then I realized one of the things she did sometimes at some play dates is she would give a running commentary on the other kids' emotional states. So she'd say to their mother, she's really angry today. Something's really, really got her worked up. And it didn't always go well with the other parents. It made me laugh. But I think I think it is the need to accept all emotions and see them all as part of a human experience. We're not robots, we're not clones, we're not, and our family relationships are not going to be sweetness and light. I think there's this idea as well, sometimes that, a good healthy family is a family everyone gets on all the time and everyone only has positive feelings, and it's like the Waltons, and it isn't. That's not real life. It's not real life. There's going to be conflicts and dramas and irritations, and it's learning how to tolerate all of those and still love each other and still be committed to each other and still like each other and still value and appreciate each other. I think it's really, really important. And I also think it's also being able to tolerate that people may have different political opinions. I come from a family where people have different political opinions, and it doesn't bother me. I have a partner who votes very differently to how I do. It doesn't bother me. It's just not something that registers to be concerned about. But I certainly meet a lot of people who really find that very difficult and uncomfortable to accept this other person who I'm in a close relationship with sees some big issues that I see as very important in a very different way to how I do. And I'm like, that's a real opportunity to grow and to learn another perspective and to understand someone else's perspective without agreeing with it, without having to fall out, while still being able to enjoy a relationship with them. But I think that's something actually we're getting really bad at. And I think it's something we need to change. Yeah. Right, yeah. So you're struggling with the shame that comes with showing emotions. And then invisible borderline, you're saying you come from a family where emotions were seen as weakness and earned punishment. Absolutely. I mean, this is hard, I think, because we're all human. We all have lots of emotions, and we all have painful feelings, and we all have anger and irritation and jealousy and envy and all the dark emotions. And, I think just understanding that even if those were not tolerated in your family, they're okay. They're okay. And maybe you might need to be a little more conscious and a little more intentional at being able to say, I have a feeling, I have an emotion, I feel sad, I feel anger, I feel resentment, I feel envious, I feel happy, I feel proud. All of that is really, really, I think, important. That's interesting, because normally anger is the emotion that people's families struggle the most with. But actually, it can also be the case that anger is okay, but don't show sadness, don't show weakness, don't show that kind of vulnerability, because anger can be an emotion that comes across as strong. But very often, what's underneath it is sadness or grief or loss. And I would imagine that if you've grown up in a family where the only emotion that's tolerated is anger, you can end up, for some people, obviously I don't know you, I don't know if it's the case for you, I would not want to be suggesting that, but you can end up in a situation where you start to only express emotions through anger. All the emotions on the surface look like anger, and you can be really struggling with all the other emotions underneath. And again, I think if you can learn how to be aware of that and how to experiment with expressing those different feelings, I think that would be really, really interesting. So yeah. Acknowledgement without over coddling is perfect. And you know what? We only have to be good enough parents. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. And we all make mistakes, and we all do things imperfectly. And that's totally fine. That's life. That's how it is, So Sarah, what about the flip side? Setting your own boundaries kindly. One of my parents comes knocking all the time, sometimes several times an hour. She often gets annoyed with me or upset if I say not now. Oh, that's hard. It's hard because then you're made to feel guilty. It's really, really tough. I think you're absolutely right. You need to set your own boundaries as kindly as possible. And I don't know what the answer is there. I don't know, I don't think there is a neat answer. I wish I could say, here's a nice 3-step program, just put this in place and your parent will be happy with your boundaries. That's probably not realistic. I think all you can do is know what your boundaries are and communicate them clearly, or as clear as you can. They may not be listened to, and then you stick to them. And something I often will suggest to Anna, tell me if you think this might be relevant to you, but something I'll often suggest more in a couples dynamic where you have a very avoidant partner is tell your partner when you'll be back. So rather than say, I'm off, leave me alone now, you say, I need some time and space, but I'm going to give you a call this evening at 8:00, or we'll talk tomorrow, or whatever it may be. But you let them know you're coming back, but then also take the time and space that you need, because ultimately it's in the service of the relationship that you do that. And I love Wendy Behary's empathic confrontation, where she would really be able to say something like, I really understand that you want to be close, that you feel like you need me, that you're anxious, that you're struggling, and I want to be there for you, but this is also so much, it's overwhelming me, and I need time for myself to do things that are important to me. And then I can come back to you, and I can come back to you feeling able to support you. And that's what I really want. And in the spirit of protecting our relationship, I'm taking this time for myself. Don't be afraid to say that. Don't be afraid if you can say that, or words, find the word that, don't take my words and just repeat them verbatim. But what would that message look like for you is what I would ask. How can you set those boundaries, but also don't be afraid to hold them. And what I'd also say is your responsibility is only to communicate your boundaries as kindly and as clearly as you can. After that, the reaction is not your responsibility. And someone can respond very negatively to that. And if they do, that's telling you something about the where they're at and the quality of your relationship. It's not telling you that you have messed up the way that you've communicated with them. And, you know, so don't blame yourself for that. So I hope, let me know, is that helpful? And also, if anyone else is here in the comments, do you have suggestions? How do you set those boundaries with kindness and clarity? Because you need both. You really do. You need both. Oh, hi, Super Anxiety Chick. Good to see you. I think I've seen you with Cluster B Milkshake. I love that. I love that video with you and her. Would you care to do a video about toxic shame? I think I have videos about toxic shame. I'll look back in the recesses. I'm sure I've done some about shame, but certainly, yeah, I think that'd be really helpful. You know, I think shame is something that you really need to approach with compassion, and it's painful. It's painful. And, you know, also to realize that probably the things that you feel deep shame about are universal. That other people, you are not the first to have experienced shame and regrets and guilt and remorse and all of that, nor will you be the last. And in some ways, when you start to realize that this is universal, that everybody who's a human being has struggled on some level with a lot of the issues that you struggle with, it's incredibly liberating, because that completely transforms shame into something much more compassionate and much more, you know, some much more manageable. And I think the real freedom often comes from being able to share something of your shame with someone else, and also all of those other difficult emotions like regret and guilt and remorse and things that you, I wish I'd done differently. I wish I'd done differently. When you can see those as your friends, not your enemies, they're not wagging fingers saying, you should not have done that. You did that wrong. You've screwed everything up. When you're able to say, like a really good friend says to you, hey, I think you deserve better than that. I think you need better than that. I think you should be bolder than that. I think you should do things differently because you deserve better. Then those sometimes difficult emotions can actually become your allies in transforming really difficult, painful experiences. Let me know if that makes sense. And I will definitely put a video on toxic shame on the list for sure, because I think that would be really helpful. So. I definitely have a problem with it. I'm assuming you mean expressing emotions other than anger. It's all I had growing up. I was happy, depressed, or rage. Yeah. And that's, you know what, that's the work. When you can start to describe how you feel, that's incredibly liberating. When you've got to know it for yourself before you can communicate it to someone else. There is if you put into Google the feelings wheel, it's got a really helpful thing with like lots of different feelings that really helps to fine tune down what it is you're feeling. Lots of people who struggle with finding their feelings find that one really, really helpful. I don't know if you've seen it. Let me know. Let me know. So right now, I'm the needy parent in my grown sons. And fallout post relationship with MPD, who wasn't their father post divorce. That's hard, you know. So Sarah, often don't stick to boundaries because consequences can be bad. Yes. Like the idea of saying when you'll be back. Yeah, you know what? The consequences may be bad. They may be. And then I think, as painful as it is, it sometimes boils down to a bit of a cost benefit analysis. Are those consequences, which are unfair, but are they worth accepting in order to have more freedom and more distance? Or is the relationship so important to you that you tolerate the fact that those consequences are there, but also you stay knowing that it's unfair and that you really look after yourself and acknowledge for yourself that this is a painful and difficult relationship for you? I don't envy that. And there are no easy answers. You know, I suspect if you went on a lot of social media accounts, they would be like, no contact, no contact. But actually, my experience is very few people are willing or want to go full no contact with a parent, even when they have a difficult relationship with a parent. And that's not to say it's never the right thing to do. I think sometimes it's exactly the right thing to do, especially if there's a whole history of abuse and the abuse is ongoing, or the behaviors that they're engaging in are so egregious that you just cannot reasonably tolerate them. Absolutely, sometimes it's the right thing to do, but sometimes you're having to tolerate that you're going to have a difficult relationship, and there may not be a resolution. There may not be any straightforward ways to resolve it. But take care of yourself and realize that's something that goes on. Lorraine, looking for ways to stop personalizing, especially stopping assuming the worst when someone doesn't reply, for instance. Yeah, that's so important, especially for people who are on the anxiously attached end of the spectrum. If someone doesn't reply, if someone puts distance in, then you're like, oh, I've got to fix it. I've got to, I want to know. I want the reassurance. I want the reassurance that I'm okay, that you're there, that you're not abandoning me. And you just got to really, really comfort yourself through that and realize, okay, you know what? I have a mind and the whole emotional system that takes me in directions that I don't always want to go in. I will sometimes start to get anxious about abandonment or feel rejected when I don't need to feel rejected. And so being willing to sit back and wait and find out rather than poking the bear, because sometimes in this situation, the constant poking, and the pursuing actually creates more withdrawal. And it doesn't mean that there's a toxic relationship. It can just be, it's a very ordinary conflict. And it's a classic conflict in relationships where one person withdraws and one person pursues. And believe me, I sympathize. I'm much more of a pursuer, but being willing to wait and tolerate the discomfort of that until you find the answer as to whether this person is rejecting you. Because what that does over a longer period of time is it starts to help you tolerate the distance, the reasonable distance in your relationship, or the not having an immediate response. It helps you tolerate that more. And then it also helps you maintain your confidence in the relationship when you see that your partner or the other person that you're pursuing does come back to you, or you discover they do not come back to you. And in that case, maybe this is just not a relationship that's good for you to be in, and that you accept that, not as a commentary on your worth, but on the reality of the relationship. So yeah, let me know. Does that ring true for you? Yeah, it's really, really tough, that need for compassion and to comfort yourself, and also recognize there's going to be difficult and uncomfortable times. And hopefully, I think realizing that this is a human experience. You're not the only one who's gone through this. It doesn't isolate you, doesn't make you a terrible person or a shameful person. But it is really hard. It really is. The mass kind of seen it. I don't know how they work. It might have been intimidating. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I don't know. Let me know what you're referring to. Yeah. Oh, Do you know, I think this is part of being a parent, that you're endlessly letting your child go, from their little babies and they need you all the time, to, when as they get older, they are much more independent, much more autonomous, and they need you less and less and less. But then when they come back, it's because they really want to. Yeah. But yeah. And I imagine, invisible borderline, that there's probably a combination of things going on there, that potentially your sons have grown up and they're in that very normal stage of being a young adult and flying the nest and needing you less and not being as physically present with you as often, because that's what young people do. And also potentially that being at the same time is also going through the grief and the loss of an important relationship. It sounds like I'm reading between the lines that it's a painful divorce. That's tough. But appreciate that's where it is, that it is both of those things together. On my way, I'm struggling with the embarrassment and humiliation of a smear campaign against me. Oh, that's tough. I just can't imagine he would go to these lengths behind my back, and yet it seems he may well have done. Wow, it's painful. I think smear campaigns in particular, they are so brutal because they just create such an experience of social shame and stigma, and you just feel like the entire world thinks the worst possible things about you, and they are judging you. And people going through this will find sometimes they don't even want to leave the house. It is just so humiliating and shameful. I'm going to let you in on a secret. The vast majority of people do not give two thoughts about what your ex is saying or doing. They do not. And I think you need to know that. And I also think, I was talking to a good friend of mine actually about this, and she said she just got to the point where she's like, let them do it, because you can't control it. And you can't do anything. And the drive sometimes to get out ahead of it, to defend yourself, can actually it can be crazy making, because you're going around trying to talk to everybody, trying to, who said what to who? You know what? Live your life. Get on with living your life. And, strategies sometimes people have found really helpful is, if you have people telling you and gossiping to you, just tell them you don't want to know what he's saying. Not interested. It's none of your business. Or spend time with people who do not know him. It's such a painful one, and it's just so all-consuming, I think. But what I would say is, nobody else is thinking about this anywhere near as much as you are, and don't let it stop you living your life and doing things that are important to you. And if you have friends, family who do not have contact with him, those are the best people to spend time with. Free yourself from that kind of gossip, and don't engage in the gossip. I love my friend's attitude. She's like, let them, that's painful. I feel for you. It's a really, really tough one. Someone in the comments this week asked me for a video about flying monkeys. So I will make a video about that. I actually find it a really difficult term, because I don't like it. It's very dehumanizing, kind of suggesting that you have these powerful narcissistic masterminds and they somehow manage to get all of these other people to do their bidding, and they have no power. They're just like the flying monkeys of the Wicked Witch of the West, when actually I think there's much, much more going on there, in terms of the people who get involved in that, whether some are naive, whether some are engaging in their own power plays and relational dynamics with the person who's quite narcissistic, and with you and with other people. And I think some people like gossip and drama, and I don't admire that. I really don't. I think there's a lot to be said for minding your own business. Yeah. Yeah, I think acknowledgement is really, really helpful. I think you're right there, Sarah. 100%. Cost benefit analysis. Yeah. It's really difficult. You know what? Sometimes you have to tolerate that the other person will sulk. Let them, she's going to sulk and be upset. And I think it's very painful sometimes to take the step of stepping away when someone's sulking or crying or pleading with you, whatever it is that they're doing. But sometimes you got to do it anyway. You have to do it anyway. And to know in your own mind, you know what, I've been as giving as I can be, and my taking space and time or leaving right now, this moment, is not an act of aggression. It's actually best for the relationship too. And that's what you're going to do. And let them sulk and be upset and cry, and that's okay. And breathe. It's fine. It's painful, but sometimes you have to accept. Do you not just think, like, after a year and a half, like, move on, man. Come on. I mean, not you, him, obviously. Like, why are you spreading rumors about an ex a year later? Come on. Yeah, it's not good. And I think as well, what is this idea that people wanting to get involved in other people's business? Come on. Mind your own. Mind your own. So annoying. So annoying. Do you have please tell me on my way that you do have some other friends who you could just relax and be yourself with, because I think you need to. Hi, Kevin. You discovered me through Jacobs. Happy to see you. I am a bit more active lately. I had a bit of a lull over the summer. I'm trying to be a bit more consistent. I am in touch with Jacob. He's all right. He's all right. He's got a lot on at the moment. I wouldn't want to say more than that, but he's all right. But I will tell him that you sent a message. So PD questions. Does basic anger management help with NPD rage? Or is there a more specialized way to help people with NPD rage? I think it's more specialized, personally. I mean, basic anger management techniques can be helpful, but I don't really like, in general, I don't like the term anger management, because I think anger is a completely normal, healthy emotion that we all experience. The problem is sometimes the way in which it gets expressed. If it gets expressed through aggression, or it gets expressed through withdrawal, can also be a problem. If whenever you get angry at someone, you're not able to express and communicate clearly, but actually you become passive aggressive and withdraw. So I think there's a lot to be said for assertiveness, for clear communication, for learning how to have difficult conversations, to tolerate the difficult emotions that come up with that. That's all valuable for everybody. I think with NPD in particular, what you really need to look at is the underlying, often, shame that's underneath the anger, and the rage that comes when the narcissistic person feels slighted in some way, feels humiliated or put down or devalued, and that rage actually being about restoring the grandiosity, restoring the image, restoring power. I think there is a particular dynamic there that is really, really important to understand, and for the narcissistic person to have some awareness of and decide, do you want this rage to be steering the ship and to be impacting on you and on all of the relationships around you? Because that rage is really damaging for people. It's really frightening for people. And it's certainly a way to pretty much guarantee that you can't have respectful, collaborative relationships. So I don't know. Let me know what you think of that too, because I know you've lived and experienced these things. So, what are your thoughts if intergenerational NPD? If I can be narcissistic and say I think I was born and bred for NPD. Any of the personality disorders, I think The general consensus in this sort of clinical literature and science at the moment is that they are a combination of genetic predisposition, where they arise as a result from a combination of genetic predisposition and the environment in which you are born into and you grow up in. And if you have, the thing is, these two things can often go together. So if you have that genetic predisposition, chances are your parents also have that genetic predisposition, and they also likely create the kind of environment that can bring that predisposition out. And also so you get a kind of double hit, actually. And it's kind of interesting because I think our personalities also shape the environment too. So the way our innate temperament is will impact on how other people respond to us. And so I think, yeah, I can see you can be born and bred and you can have a kind of genetic predisposition that brings those kind of tendencies out. At the same time, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with any kind of underlying temperament. And I think that, there are strengths in that temperament too. So someone who's quite that kind of classic, more grandiose presentation of narcissism, the gregariousness, the ambition, the drive, those are all positive traits applied in a good way, in a positive way, can be really beneficial to you and to society. So I think it's important to think that temperament is important, but it is not everything. So it's temperament plus the whole environment and what you decide in the long term as an adult you're going to do with it. Because they're not diagnosed. Yeah, I mean, this is you certainly will see those things going back and back and back. So too with other disorders. So too with kind of neurodivergence. So people get diagnosed now much more frequently with ADHD and autism, but then you look back and you realize, hang on, this is kind of, that now my grandparents' behavior makes a lot more sense through that light. So that's true of any of the sort of mental disorders. But yeah, you can certainly think, particularly with the personality-driven disorders, yeah, there will be an impact through each generation because you shape the environment of the next one. I'm so glad you're rebuilding your friendship. So glad. So Sarah, you try to remember to breathe. Yeah, you have to remember to breathe. Like, there is definitely on her part an attitude of, I've done something unacceptable. Like, yes, you've got to know in yourself, my decision to put distance in or to leave on time or to create some limits is an act of care for the relationship. It is not an act of aggression, because the alternative might be you constantly giving in to everything she asks of you. And that is a recipe for resentment. It really, really is. So, yeah. Yeah. Send him a message. He's on Instagram, or leave a comment on his channel. He is still posting. He'll still be checking his comments, I'm sure. But yeah. Yeah, there's always drama in families. There always is. And when you have any kind of parent figure who's got kind of narcissistic tendencies or any extreme tendencies, whatever they may be, it doesn't have to be narcissistic, but they begin to color the relationship throughout the family and the alliances with everyone else. And that's tough. It really is tough. You guys, it has been so much fun tonight. If you have any more questions or comments, I can be here for another little bit. Feel free to ask them, but otherwise I might well just wrap up. But I will be trying to do this every Sunday night at 9. So, feel do please join me again and let me know if you have particular things you'd like me to cover, either in a live or in videos, because it would be great to see you. But as there's no more questions coming, I am going to bid you all good night and hopefully see you soon. Take good care. Hang on. Okay. You got in a last question. Yeah. It's not for me to tell you what your boundaries are. Okay. That's for you. You need to figure that out for yourself. But yeah, you make a decision and you decide what you want to do and stick to it. And it's not an act of aggression. It really isn't. And if you're struggling with it, I would say it's really helpful to maybe just run through it with someone else. Not to get their approval, you don't need it, but just for you to have a bit of a sanity check and to boost yourself up that this is what you want to do. These are the boundaries you want to hold, and it is not an act of aggression to hold your boundaries. The mastermind, go ahead. I'll make it the last question of the evening. What is your question about masking? When it comes to the nature-nurture debate, it's 100% nature in a way, because nature dictates how individuals who create the environment. It's both. It's an interaction. Nature creates the environment facilitates the nature. Sometimes, particularly when I work with people who are diagnosed with personality disorders and I hear the stories from their backgrounds, I wonder how anyone comes out of that fine. They've been through such severe neglect and trauma. You can certainly see how the environment has created the person and the challenges that they face. But I think it's both. I think the research is really clear it's both. So masterminds, about masking. I have the tendency to not show one person all of me. I feel no one can handle all of me. Like one person, a group sees one side while another sees a different side. Is that masking? Oh, I think this is also kind of normal. We're all human. We all have different sides of us. We all have different parts of us that come out more in different settings and different circumstances. I don't think that means we're masking or that we're being deceptive. So I think there's too many negative connotations that go with that. I guess what I would say is, what are the parts of you that you want to hide from some people and why? And would it be better for your relationships if they were able to see more of you? Because sometimes it's okay to not show all parts of you. When I'm at work, my clients don't want to see all parts of me. That's maybe not such a good idea. I don't necessarily want to show my small child all parts of me. There are some things that are best managed, right? So my question would be kind of, what do you feel like you're hiding? What do you, and what would be best for your relationships? Would it be better for your relationships to show more of you to some people? I hope that makes sense. I did say that's the last question. I do not really have an opinion on HG Tutor. Oh my God. I'm trying to say goodnight, and Sarah, you pop up. Everyone with a disorder is stigmatized. It's interesting. The States and the UK are different here, actually. I think it's probably more stigmatized here than in the States. But I think, everyone can be stigmatized. And it'd be interesting, what's the stigma that you've come across in relation to ADHD? I think there's also kind of a belief in the UK at the moment. There's like a lot of adults getting diagnosed with ADHD, And I think there's a bit of a belief that it's not real, which I don't think is true. I think it's been dramatically underdiagnosed up until now. So there's that. But I think in general, I think the attitudes towards ADHD are definitely improving compared to how they have been in the past. And there's probably more acceptance. But let me know. Let me know what you think. Unless, Sarah, you reply pretty quickly, I'm probably going to wrap up. See, now you know, busted. You were busted. ADHD is real. Oh, for sure. ADHD is so real. And the treatment as well for ADHD is primarily medication. People surprise me as a psychologist that I say that, but the research trials on ADHD management, medication comes out trumps. Where therapy can be more helpful sometimes is dealing with the effects of ADHD, how it's colored the way you see yourself, how it's affected your self-esteem. Those are the things that I think therapy can be really helpful with for people with ADHD. But the medications, they work so well. For some people, they're just life-changing, you know. So, yeah. I would tend to agree with you there. I think there's a lot of content on the internet that's overly dramatic and shocking and not really an accurate reflection of the whole picture. But anyway, on that note, I will actually say goodnight. Thank you so much. And I will hopefully see you again soon. And I will be back next week, 9 p.m. UK time, which is, I think, 4 p.m. Eastern and even earlier Pacific. It's too late at night for me to figure out what the time is in different zones, but same time next week. And I will look forward to seeing some of you then.